Hey, what's up DIYers? Mike Bors with the Mike Bors channel. Thank you for watching. We are working on our MerCruiser outdrive lower unit, and in today's video we are going to show you the proper and safe way with the right tools to remove your internal pinion gear bearing. Not the gear, that's already removed, but the bearing. Let's get started. All right, DIYers, at the workstation now. On the left-hand side, you can see our upper unit that is already rebuilt and completed. We are now rebuilding the lower unit. We're at the stage where we need to remove the internal pinion bearing. And again, that's what we're going to show you in this video. Let's get started. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we have got everything removed. That is the drive shaft. That's the pinion gear, the shift shaft and crank, as you can see here, as well as the bushing. And to the right side, this is our propeller shaft, clutch dog, and forward gear. And there are the tools to remove it and install it. On the left-hand side, we've got a long driver rod into the driver, and that is what we are going to use in this video to remove that internal bearing. And let's go up top and check out this little insert or cavity here in the lower unit. And this is where the drive shaft slides into and goes all the way through the pinion bearing down below and through the pinion gear and is secured with the pinion nut. Let me scroll down in. And in our case, with our serial number, again, Alpha 1 Gen 1, we have 18 needle bearings. So I wanted to show you a close-up view of the pinion bearing still installed. And from here, it is time to remove it. And back to the tools. Again, on the left-hand side is the removal tool. However, we need that washer removed from the install tool. And we'll do that right now. Washer is now removed, and back to the driver rod and driver. You can see some visible thread. It is extremely important to screw that driver all the way on that driver rod until it is properly secured and tight and no visible thread is showing. At this point, I've repositioned the lower unit to the floor because we are going to be doing some pounding with that hammer on that drive, and I wasn't interested in doing that on top of the workbench. So from here, we are going to insert that driver and rod inside that cavity of the lower unit and in position inside the bearing. And DIYers, it is extremely important to have all of your bearings installed and present during the removal process. If you are missing a needle, add some grease to it and reposition it inside the bearing. Again, all needles must be present during the removal process. And I am going to do my absolute best to give you a good view of this, but it will be tough. Again, ever so gently insert the driver and rod to the internal cavity and shift it in position inside the bearing. And you may have just heard that we actually had a few needles fall out, and we grabbed our 2,4-C grease. We're going to grease up these needles and reinstall them. Carefully pull the needles out of the lower unit, and I'll do one at a time, as you can see. And I've got some 2,4-C on my finger. I'll just lubricate the needle, and now let's reinstall them. Next, I ever so slightly grease the needle bearings that these are going to go up against, and carefully shift this in place and roll it. And now I'll use my finger to push these two bearings apart, and I'll install the last one. And the last needle bearing coming in, shift that into place. And from here, I'll just make sure that all the needles are properly seated. And if any look out of place, just carefully grease it and push it back into place. And back to it. As you shift this rod and driver down the cavity, try to align it and go slow, be precise. And I am in position. Let me give you a better look here. And here's a better view of it. Do your best to center the driver on the needle bearings. From here, I'll reposition the camera and hammer this bearing out. However, do not forget your washer. Before we start banging at this rod, we want to carefully shift the washer onto the rod and down the rod and into the actual bearing cup cavity. And again, this is going to help stabilize the rod as we hammer it. And a close-up of the washer shifted down inside the bearing cup or cavity, and that rod is much more stabilized and ready to be hammered. And DIYers, no need to rush this. Be precise and patient. Take a look down below and verify it is removed, and carefully shift up and remove the rod, washer, and driver. Set that in a safe location. I now have the lower unit and stand on the workbench. Let's take a closer look inside. And you can see all the needle bearings, and it looks like the carrier came out in a few different pieces. We are going to now pull all the needle bearings out as well as the carrier. And again, all I'm doing now is retrieving all of the needle bearings. As you can see right here, again, there's 18 of them. Make sure you get all 18 out if your outdrive has that number. And be mindful as you shift all of these parts out, you do not want to scratch or score any portion of that inner case where the gears and clutch dog go. And yes, there's the carrier and it broke, so I have to verify all the parts come out. There's another part. And there are a lot of needles. And it looks like a couple needles are really deep into the inner portion of the case and in the cavity where your drain port screw is. And now to a close-up of all the needle bearings and carrier. Again, 18, we've got 5, 10, 15 on the lower right, and 3, making 18 needles. And I've also retrieved all of the broken parts of the carrier. I am going to rebuild it to ensure that we have every single part that broke off of that larger portion. And here's the update. I took a few minutes, gathered all the broken parts, and I rebuilt the carrier. And as you can see, there are some cracks right here. There were 3 little pieces on top, and then there was a large piece. You can see the large crack here. And this is the bottom portion of the carrier that gave way. However, there was still enough grip on the present needles and the driver to remove it. And DIYers, this is an extremely important step to ensure you have every single piece of this carrier in the event that you break it. Really for 2 reasons. Number 1, when it comes time to reinstall the new bearing, you do not want any of the old bearing inside that cavity. That will cause havoc on the install process. And number 2, in the event that you leave any of those little pieces inside the lower unit, when it comes time to put everything back together and add the gear lube and turn the engine on, any little pieces of this metal will destroy your inner gear, and you do not want that. So again, DIYers, that is how you remove a pinion bearing. In the event that you are interested in picking up right where we left off, definitely check out the link scrolling above. Do us a favor, below the video, you will see that thumbs up icon. Click on that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely ring your YouTube bell. That would be very helpful to us. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.